about to listen to the Dr. Daliah Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Daliah Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Daliah.
We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. Daliah, 1-877-DOCDALI. So all eyes are on Jamaica. Unfortunately, this Hurricane Melissa is one of the biggest. The most powerful hurricane of 2025 is making landfall on Jamaica as we speak. This has sparked huge warnings for devastating damage, catastrophic damage, and loss of life. And we are praying that the island can withstand this blow. Apparently, the winds have been clocked, according to CNN, at 185 miles per hour. This is one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes in history. In fact, they're saying this is even stronger than Hurricane Katrina and the damage it did back in '05. And that actually was a Hurricane 3. It was at one point a hurricane category 5, and then it downgraded to a Hurricane 3 right before it hit land, but then it hovered, killed about 1,800 people, caused $108 billion in damage in the Louisiana and Gulf states. The deadliest hurricane ever to hit U.S. soil was the Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900. Over 10,000 people died. With Jamaica, we are anticipating, sadly, major damage, and we are concerned that it could trigger a humanitarian disaster. We're being told that Hurricane Melissa has already killed 7 people, 3 in Jamaica while they were preparing for the storm, 3 in Haiti, and 1 in the Dominican Republic. Melissa will not turn around and hit the U.S., we don't believe. It's supposed to, after it passes over Cuba, go and shift to the right or the east of Bahamas, go back out into the Atlantic. But, being that we are coming up near the end of hurricane season, it shows you how long these waters are remaining, keeping their heat and being able to produce such a massive amount of moisture and a massive storm system. According to a restaurant owner in the village of Alligator Pond on the southwestern coast of Jamaica, he has described scenes of panic and devastation. Hurricane Melissa, they said, already wiped out the coastline. Everall Christian spoke to CNN Zayn Escher over the telephone while he was evacuating and trying to reach higher ground. It was a decision, according to CNN, that he wished he made earlier. But you could hear the fierce winds. He says the sea level is coming over the wall and we're in serious trouble. The whole coastline is gone. The waves are as high as 15 feet and the wind speed is unbelievable. The electricity grid is already straining. They've had several power outages even before Melissa came and made landfall. The electricity grid is managed by Jamaica Public Service. It's the country's only electricity provider. It's already been impacted in the hurricane, even before the hurricane started to hit. And so, unfortunately, 240,000 people, as of this report, were already without power before landfall. Now they're anticipating more. Now, most of the hospitals on the island are still receiving power with generators, etc., except they say the parishes of Manchester and St. Elizabeth have been on standby generator power already. So, as Melissa's making landfall, we are telling people to brace themselves, move to higher ground. We know that, our partners in American Red Cross, Salvation Army, and, Vitalant are working to make sure that they have what, as much resources for the people as possible. I always recommend donating blood. The blood is always needed. And if you don't have money to donate or supplies to send, which is always, I love getting groups of people together and communities together to get clothes and food. But many of these locations that suffer from this, they can't handle the they can't get mail. They can't get shipments. So they usually ask for money so they could purchase their own supplies and what they need. Earlier today, meteorologists confirmed that Melissa is now more intense than Katrina. And this catastrophic path is in process. So they believe that the storm, even though the bands have already hit Jamaica, the most dangerous part is going to be hitting within the next 12 hours. And then, of course, affecting eastern Cuba. With hurricanes, we were fairly lucky in America that we didn't have as much of the above average hurricane that was predicted. Researchers expected 17 named storms this season. I don't want to jinx it. The mean is 14.4. 9 of these storms were expected to become hurricanes, 4 of which classified as major. North Carolina State University researchers also predicted a milder but still active Atlantic Basin hurricane season. The North Carolina researchers expected 12 to 15 named storms, which is more closer to the 14.4 mean. 6 to 8 of them hurricanes, and 2 to 3 classified as major. As we said yesterday, hurricane season usually begins June 1st. Because of special tropical weather outlooks, they've suggested maybe issuing hurricane season delineation prior to that, like mid-May. But they've changed it from November 1st to November 30th. So hurricane season can extend. We still can have another 4 weeks. Now, September is usually the most active month. Hurricane Katrina hit end of August, early September back in 2005. But the categories, just to put this in perspective, this Hurricane Melissa is 185 miles per hour. A Category 5 is anything over 157. I mean, it's going to be a Category 5 for a while until it starts to downgrade. And anything 3 and above can cause devastating damage. Category 4 and 5 storms catastrophic. And so, we are praying that this is a fast moving and doesn't hover like it did with Katrina, and quickly move past the island, not causing the damage that's being predicted and anticipated. Godspeed. 1877 Doc Daliah, don't go away. Hey guys, it's Dr. Daliah. Fantasy football season is coming, but sadly, too many of you are taking the bench while the country takes part in one of the most exciting and lucrative industries out there. Don't know how to play? Well, huddle up and listen. Paul Kalikas and I have written a fantasy football pocket guide for beginners. This book walks you through the basics and shows you how simple and lucrative joining or creating a fantasy football team can be. Read our fantasy football pocket guide for beginners found on Amazon, or follow the links on X and Facebook. That's Fantasy Football Pocket Guides for Beginners. Don't be left out.
Increase fuel economy up to 7.9% with Hot Shot's Secret Gasoline Extreme, the solution to maximize your engine's performance and fuel economy. Whether you're driving a sports car or a daily commuter, Gasoline Extreme is specially formulated with PEA to deep clean. Don't settle for an average driving experience. Upgrade to Hot Shot's Secret Gasoline Extreme and go further on each tank. Order now on Amazon or HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
Hi, it's Mark Falter, host of the Financial Fitness Show. I strongly believe that no one should ever pay 1 penny more in taxes than they are legally obligated. Unfortunately, for most hardworking Americans, this just isn't the case. Why? Because most people spend more time planning next weekend's getaway than trying to ensure they're going to pay less in taxes. My financial fitness team has put together some materials that I know are going to help you. It's the Tax Savings Kit. Tax Savings Kit includes 3 things: free tax analysis, top 10 ways to pay less in taxes, and an investor's guide to taxes. Now, how do you get it? Simple. 866-764-2635. Again, 866-764-2635. I'm Mark Falter. This is Financial Fitness, making personal finance profitable.
back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Doc Dali, 1-877 DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Daliah, Facebook, The Dr. Daliah Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So last month, when President Donald Trump and Dr. Oz and RFK Jr. had warned pregnant women that there are risks with Tylenol that have been, established in the literature over the past few decades, but not necessarily in a very organized and concerted educational campaign. They did this press release, which I think was still a little chaotic, but they did a press release to warn pregnant women about the risks of Tylenol. And this was kind of a shock in the medical community for a couple reasons. One is I've known that Tylenol had some risks, and I would warn patients. So I was assuming that other doctors were doing that as well. Overall, in many cases, if the benefits outweigh the risks, and we need to lower a woman's high fever, or they're in pain and they're going to be reaching for something that could be even more dangerous, doctors have allowed pregnant women to use Tylenol. But they should have always, from the beginning, explained there still could be risks. And so when I saw this happen, I was like, aren't doctors already warning people? And then Trump had just told pregnant women, don't take Tylenol at all, bear through it, push through it. And again, my caveat to that, my only problem with that is if a pregnant woman is having a very high fever can affect the fetus. But then again, pregnant women should not be treating their high fever alone at home. If a pregnant woman has a high fever, they need to seek medical care, because is this a UTI? Is this pneumonia? Is this flu? I mean, these are things that need to be treated in a pregnant woman. So they shouldn't be just going to take Tylenol. If you have a high fever, we need to figure out why you have the fever. But Tylenol may be indicated in the healthcare regimen of a pregnant woman. It's just, for years I've known, because I've been seeing studies saying, this may not be 100% safe. Well, after that came out, doctors, again, mixed along party lines, and I don't understand why medicine should not be political, but doctors like, no, take as much Tylenol as you need, it's fine. And then others are like, well, no, there's risks to anything. We don't understand, the microscopic physiological changes that and pharmacological effects. And so, if you don't need to pop a pill when you're pregnant, don't. But let us decide, the benefits versus the risks if you need to be taking acetaminophen. Well, now we're being told that the Texas Attorney General is suing the makers of Tylenol, saying they failed to warn consumers of the risks. Now, this lawsuit is against Johnson & Johnson and its spinoff company. This is according to USA Today, Kenvue. Now, according to Attorney General Paxton, apparently Kenvue, according to USA Today, was created to shield their assets against lawsuits when Johnson & Johnson was getting beat up over the fentanyl crisis and the narcotic overdose crisis, which I think I had a problem with. If many people are overdosing because of cartel, or illegally made drugs, going after the pharmaceutical companies because you can't go after the cartels, not that cool. But they were implicated based on medications that they brought to market. And so apparently there's another company that USA Today is saying that was to shield their assets against lawsuits. But according to Texas Attorney General Paxton, he says these corporations, quote unquote, lied for decades, knowingly endangering millions to line their pockets. This was a statement he made today. He said, additionally, seeing that the day of reckoning was coming, Johnson & Johnson attempted to escape responsibility by illegally offloading their liability into a different company. By holding Big Pharma accountable for poisoning our people, we will help make America healthy again. And so Tylenol, the makers of Tylenol or acetaminophen, is saying it's safe. And it's safe throughout the whole pregnancy. And they are concerned about the perpetuation of quote unquote of misinformation. They said they're going to defend themselves against baseless claims. So a few years back, in 2021, we had talked about how, the FDA may be reclassified or considering reclassifying Tylenol, especially since you had pregnant women with COVID that were turning towards the Tylenol. COVID back in 2021 gave you a horrible headache. And some people got body aches, some people got fever, so they were using Tylenol to control their symptoms. But we talked about this on the show even before then, that that they might have to reclassify it. It was a category B back then, and I think it still is, meaning no risk has been found in animal studies, but not fully quantified in humans. But the fetal safety had been questioned. There was a study looking at an increased risk of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That study was, let me see if I could pull it up, 2017, in the journal Pediatrics. Prenatal exposure to acetaminophen and risk of ADHD. And they said short-term maternal use was negatively associated with ADHD in offspring. Long-term maternal use of Tylenol was substantially associated with ADHD, even after adjusting for indications of use, family history, etc. Then there was another, so that was in 2017, another study expressed concern of acetaminophen on fetal kidneys and urged caution on what it could do to the urogenital system. Now, that study came out also in 2017. The study was in nephrology dialysis transplantation, called ibuprofen and acetaminophen consumption during first trimester pregnancy impacts nephrogenesis or creation of the kidneys. And, so those were concerning. Then in 2021, September, a study published in Nature's Review Endocrinology found increased fetal risk of neurodevelopmental, reproductive, and urogenital disorders with acetaminophen during pregnancy and urged patients to minimize exposure. A direct quote from that study was, "We recommend that pregnant women should be cautioned at the beginning of pregnancy to forego acetaminophen unless its use is medically indicated. Consult with the physician or pharmacist if they're uncertain whether use is indicated and before using on a long-term basis, and minimize exposure by using the lowest effective dose for the shortest possible time." Why? Again, because they were concerned about neurodevelopmental implications. So, I'm not a fan of suing pharmaceutical companies, but somebody has some explaining to do. If these studies have been coming out, I've known about them, most of them have known about them. The way law works is if Tylenol was aware, if the makers of Tylenol were aware, and there are studies addressing this, then you could easily put it on your package insert or on the box saying, there are studies evaluating. If you don't believe the studies, you don't necessarily have to say you believe them, but you could say there are studies evaluating risk to fetuses with this medication. Discuss with your provider. And I think that would have provided them some protection. And like I said, I've known about it, and I've told patients, and I've told my listeners, be careful. Don't be popping Tylenol because, there's been studies showing that there could be risks. It's just, why did it take now, 2025, for, finally, the Make America Healthy movement to finally bring that out? Is it because of government's relationship with Big Pharma? Now, I know people said, oh, well, Trump has a beef with Johnson & Johnson. So he's trying to hurt Johnson & Johnson by this. I don't want to get into that argument. I don't know if that is baseless as well. But as I said, I did disagree with Trump saying no Tylenol whatsoever. Let us doctors guide patients with that. Thank you. And I do appreciate Trump bringing this to light and having us talk about it. But again, let the medical community deal with this. Trump can do a lot of things. He's a business developer. His foreign policy, he could do a lot. He's pretty talented. But no. Let the medical experts deal with this. But the RFK Jr. and Trump and the FDA, looking at maybe this has to be reclassified. In fact, they were looking at the reclass. They were thinking about this back in 2021, even the Biden administration. So why weren't pregnant women made aware? Now, do I think Tylenol causes all this rise in autism? No, I think there's other culprits. But I do believe that if you are taking a medication, you shouldn't be thinking it's 100% safe. Understand that there could be risks. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH. Don't go away.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So nearly half of all adults in the United States have hypertension, high blood pressure. Nearly half. And about 1 in 4 of them, or 25% of them, we are being told are actually in control. Now, even though hypertension seems to affect men more than women, women are being affected with high blood pressure also in alarming amounts, and younger individuals. And what's so, ironic about it is high blood pressure is preventable. It's one of the leading preventable risk factors for heart disease and stroke. I am very, very excited about the American Heart Association volunteer expert, Dr. Rachel Bond, joining us today. She's going to talk about what we had spoken about last month about the new high blood pressure guidelines and what we need to know about the silent killer. Dr. Bond, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Wow. Well, you are a lifesaver. So yes, we were very excited that the American Heart Association released new high blood pressure guidelines. Talk to us about those.
Yeah, so the American Heart Association, in conjunction with the American College of Cardiology, released these new blood pressure guidelines. Things that haven't changed based on the guidelines are how we define high blood pressure. And the first way of defining it is to understand what's normal. So for your audience members, when we think about high blood pressure, typically a normal blood pressure is less than 120 and less than 80 on the bottom. Anything above that is considered elevated up until the first stage, where the blood pressure is above 130/80, or the second stage, which is above 140/90. As you mentioned, high blood pressure is usually a silent killer, meaning there are no warning signs or symptoms that could really tell someone that they have high blood pressure. And the only way to better understand it is to go to the doctor and get your blood pressure checked. The guidelines are recommending that we do that as early as possible because it's such a preventable long-term risk factor for future cardiovascular disease.
Absolutely. And, we can also predict that people may have it later in life when we screen them when they're pregnant. And so high blood pressure screening during pregnancy is extremely important. Talk to us about blood pressure in pregnancy.
Yeah, one thing that the guidelines wanted to highlight is that there are different checkpoints in a female's life where their risk of blood pressure as well as risk of heart disease could be much greater. One of those checkpoints is pregnancy. When we think about pregnancy, it's actually oftentimes the female's first stress test. And like any stress test, your blood pressure may get elevated, but unfortunately, it also may stay elevated. For women who have high blood pressure during pregnancy, they're at about a 2 to 4 times greater risk of having high blood pressure outside of pregnancy, and also at a 2 to 4 times greater risk of having cardiac disease. And that cardiac disease may not be immediate. It can actually occur up to several decades after the actual delivery. So we are encouraging our female patients out there to understand their pregnancy history and share that information, that pivotal information, with their physician and healthcare professional.
Also, God bless these, young mothers. You go through all the prenatal care. Now you have a baby and your priorities completely shift from you to baby. And we forget that there are things that need to be followed up on: our blood sugar, our hearts, our blood pressure. So that was some fantastic advice. And so, men and high blood pressure, we speak about that all the time. And, a lot of women don't realize that their numbers are rising. Talk to us about what actions, we could take to minimize risks.
Yeah, so there are several actions. And I think the most profound thing is that many of the actions, meaning the prescription to medicine, actually don't come from actual prescriptions. A lot of it comes from things that we can do on a daily basis to lower our risk. So that includes getting up and walking. The American Heart Association recommends at least 150 minutes per week of some form of moderate exercise. That could include walking, jogging, swimming, of course, going to the gym, but something as basic as walking at a brisk pace can make a big difference. The other thing they recommend is eating clean. So a lot of that includes limiting our saturated fat, our high amounts of sodium, and replacing that with healthy fat. A lot of times healthy fat comes from fish or olives and olive oil, and also being aware of our portion sizes. The American Heart Association also recommends getting at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night, because not only does that lower your stress level, which of course could increase your risk of high blood pressure and heart disease, but it also in the long run leads to better outcomes when it comes to your cardiovascular health.
So true. These steps, we all could take. They're not difficult to do. I exercise is huge. Hydrating, with water, avoiding salt, like you said. Any other suggestions you have for our listeners?
Oh, our goal right now is also to make sure you're getting your blood pressure checked regularly. One thing that was a little different for the guidelines this time around was the focus on making sure that the management is very individual. How we can do that is also investing in a home blood pressure machine. There are websites, one of them, which is validatebp.org, that gives you all of the machines that have been validated by the FDA. And that could be the difference between your blood pressure being well controlled versus your blood pressure being not. Because although you should be going to the doctor regularly, it's so important and pivotal to see the trends of what your blood pressure looks like when you're at home. And that, to me, I would say makes the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to ways that you can take control of your health and understand your numbers.
Exactly, especially like with white coat hypertension. Sometimes it's not that it's a doctor's code, but you're getting stressed out by your in-laws or by other things, and blood pressure is rising. We know you have another interview, so we don't want to hold you any longer, but oh my gosh, you have been such a wealth of information. Where can my listeners go for more information?
Yeah, so for more information, the American Heart Association has 2 websites. One is heart.org, and the other one is goredforwomen.org/HBP, which stands for high blood pressure.
Gosh, I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you and the American Heart Association do, and we can't wait to have you back.
Thank you. Have a good one.
1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOC-DALI. We've talked about this on the show before. White coat hypertension. It was a term that came up because patients would go to the doctor and the doctor would say, your blood pressure's up. And they're like, well, that's odd. I think it's because I'm nervous, because I'm around you. And they, well, yeah, the white coat, is probably making you nervous. So, in fact, I even stopped wearing a white coat for the longest time because this white coat hypertension was technically a thing. And they still use that term. The problem is I would tell patients, please check your blood pressure at home. Because if my white coat is enough to make your blood pressure jump 10 points, 15 points, 20 points, then what's happening when your mother-in-law is calling or your mom? Or what's happening when you're driving in your neighborhood and a kid loses their ball in the middle of the street and you have to slam on your brakes? You know, if your blood pressure is spiking, you're watching a sexy movie, then if a white coat is causing your blood pressure to spike, that means your baseline might not be in the control you need. And so anybody with white coat hypertension needs to have follow-up. They have to be evaluated. And you know, blaming a white coat or in-laws, that your body doesn't care. Because that high blood pressure causes end organ damage. We call it end organ damage when the downstream part of that blood pressure affects the heart, affects the brain, affects the kidneys. And it stinks because you can't feel it. Now, some people can. When I have patients that say, my blood pressure is up, I could feel it. I believe them. I believe some people can feel it. But just because you don't feel it doesn't mean it's not a thing. Doesn't mean it's not affecting you. And that's what's frustrating. Now, I'm fortunate. I get my blood pressure checked often. High blood pressure runs in the family, both my mom and dad. But fortunately, I've been lucky. I get my blood pressure checked every time I donate blood. And so, you know, I'm on top of it. And every time I go to the doctor. But if you don't have a regular medical provider and you're not seeing the doctor or not seeing somebody regularly, you need to get that done. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH. Don't go away.
Hey guys, it's Clyde. You know, we've had a lot of requests for Ground Zero merchandise, so we put together an online store with a big variety of high-quality items. I'm really excited to let you know about these things. We have a lot to offer you and your loved ones. In addition to our regular apparel, such as t-shirts, beanies, hoodies, and hats, we've expanded our product line with posters, flags, aprons, mugs, and a whole lot more. We also have Ground Zero collectibles along with a limited edition of items like a Clyde Lewis canvas portrait, a Ground Zero embroidered jacket that will certainly make for great gifts and for interesting conversations with family and friends. And we now offer publications such as Ron Patton's book about mind control, MK Zine, and back copies of the official magazine of Ground Zero while it was in print. Paranoia, the Conspiracy Reader, also coming in 2023, are updated and revised books that I've written. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. So shop today at our official store by going to groundzeromerch.com. Again, that's groundzeromerch.com.
Hey, America. How tired are you of mainstream corporate media's biased narratives and manipulated news? Their dishonesty and attempts to influence this generation have been exposed, put on display for anyone who's even half paying attention. But the New American magazine has been an honest source of news and commentary for over 50 years. This is your opportunity to receive the stalwart of principled journalism at a deep discount. Picture a beautifully published magazine arriving at your doorstep twice a month, packed with insightful stories written with integrity. It's also available digitally on the New American's mobile app. Get up to speed with intelligent coverage from a freedom perspective. Right now, for a limited time, the New American is available to radio listeners at a 25% discount on a new subscription. Visit thenewamerican.com/radio25 and receive 25% off. Subscribe today at thenewamerican.com/radio25.
On the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So bird flu never went away, and bird flu cases are rising. This is expected with, the colder time of year. In fact, we're hearing that countries have started to cull many of their birds that sadly, Germany, I think, had to cull 500,000 birds as bird flu is spreading. Reuters is reporting Europe is concerned about this upcoming crisis, And, countries are now ordering poultry indoors to protect them from wild birds that can have the virus. Again, human risk is low. But as we know, bird flu can, we believe, affect other animals, as we've seen with cows and lambs and sheep. And we have seen some human infections who have been working with animals afflicted with bird flu. So this, even though bird flu, I think it killed one person last year, and it can be deadly. Right now, in terms of overall risk to the human population, it's still low, but it's something we want to curb as quickly as possible. And so governments and the poultry industry in Europe are getting very, very nervous because of the devastation and then, inability to then, feed. We got Thanksgiving coming up, and, people like their chicken and their poultry. They say the disease has caused 56 outbreaks in 10 European Union countries and Britain. As you know, Britain Brexited from the European Union. And this has been just in the time frame from August to mid-October. Poland, one of the top European Union poultry producers, has been affected as well, Spain and Germany. And so seeing it come and spread into 10 countries this early in the season is concerning. And they do not want this to resemble 2022, where we had the worst bird flu crisis. Last year, there were 31 countries or outbreaks in 9 countries during the same period. So this is already on schedule to be more aggressive. In terms of America, they say we are starting to see bird flu hit America. They say since September, nearly 90 U.S. chicken and turkey flocks have experienced avian flu outbreaks. This has led to the destruction of 7.4 million birds. I've noticed chicken, things starting to cost more at the grocery store as it pertains to this. Be aware of egg prices. But sadly, I hate to see these animals die, because there's a bird flu outbreak and they're trying to, in a way, protect and slow the spread. We don't want to wait till an animal gets sick. Unfortunately, you can, if there's, fewer hosts to take on the disease, it doesn't spread. It's a very, very sad reality. But people ask, why didn't Ebola spread like COVID did when Ebola was deadlier? Well, there's the answer. When you have something that is so deadly, you have fewer hosts that could then stay alive and turn around and spread it. So some of the deadliest diseases are even though COVID was deadly, if people are able to still live and spread it, the disease can propagate more. So as bird flu outbreaks are now climbing in not only Europe and other countries, but the U.S., this is obviously going to be a concern. They say water birds like geese and ducks are carrying avian flu, and it can affect commercial poultry. Now, there's been a lot of criticism as to, well, what is RFK Jr. doing? There was a movement to vaccinate our poultry, where if we needed to protect our poultry from bird flu, farmers were hoping that we would have a vaccine. Well, not all farmers, but the hope was that they could give their animals a vaccine. It could prevent those animals from getting the bird flu. They don't have to cull them or kill them. And then they could salvage their, salvage their bottom line, salvage their animals, and be able to still function and produce our eggs and chicken and poultry, etc. The problem was, if you remember, we talked about this was, I think, a couple years ago, there was a hesitation for people to want mRNA vaccinated poultry the vaccine that they were going to work on, which again, the science behind an mRNA vaccine has been around for decades, for a while. We used it and we did emergency authorizations and we fast-tracked the COVID vaccine. There were side effects to the COVID vaccine, but I do believe the COVID vaccine saved lives. I just think it never should have been mandated because there are side effects. The problem is you have a lot of people that do not trust the mRNA technology. I'm comfortable with the mRNA technology, but hesitation remains because has it been, do we know much about eating something that was vaccinated with it? What we have a manipulation of mRNA and DNA or our cytochromes, our cells RNA, and so some people have. I'm comfortable with it, but having not handled my booster well and having side effects from that, anybody that experienced something remotely similar, if not more severe than what I had with my mRNA vaccine, it makes people start to be more cautious. And so there's been a growing call to not vaccinate or inject our animals that we're eating. Already there's huge concerns over the hormones and other things that we're ingesting. And there's a huge demand for grass-fed or non-hormone fed animals and organic foods and fewer pesticides. And so I don't know where, how much movement has been made on that. I do believe we still should develop a vaccine. I think with the way this avian flu keeps coming back, and it seems to keep coming back stronger, the concept of, well, let's just kill the hosts so that we can minimize spread, I don't think that's a viable option, because the avian, you can't kill all the birds. And I definitely don't want that as a precedent set for future infectious disease. And so I do believe a vaccine, and I think even Trump was actually pro, vaccine as it pertains to solving the bird flu crisis. So I know people say, well, Trump's anti-vaccine. Not exactly. I believe when this was happening, he was suggesting that we do, find a way to attack this virus head on. And in doing so, that would involve fighting fire with fire or pharmacologically getting a defense that involves immunity. But I don't know where we're moving on that as of now. On top of that, we're still in the shutdown. And this government shutdown is not going away anytime soon. I think this is going to go on for at least another week or two. Unfortunately, and we're going to be talking about that, the ramifications of that have been a disaster. So once the government reopens, we do need to hear, the farmers need to hear, what does the CDC and the FDA plan as it pertains to what we can do. Now, there are ways we can minimize risk in terms of our animals not being having access to wild geese and wild birds, ventilation systems, more room, there's things we can do. But I do eventually think we might need a vaccine. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.